Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today. It is October 27th. It is Thursday and the evening, and I want to take an opportunity to speak with you about something that is changing our state, our nation, something that has a major impact that is getting really no attention whatsoever. And I want to share that information with you, and let's consider what this may mean for all of us. Now, before I do that, I do want to mention that if this is the first time you're seeing our channel, we welcome you. We thank you for being part of our audience. We want you to know that we do long-form political commentary, and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we go out and we do a live stream with you. We reach out on all the social media that the internet overlords will allow to be able to hear your voice, to hear what you have to say from anywhere in the world, because you matter. Your texts, your chats, even your phone calls all matter because we believe in the First Amendment. We believe in your right to be able to speak about these issues that affect us all. And so we hope to see you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I want to talk about, and I should first mention, the camera looks a little bit different. One of our cameras, the Canon M50, just died. So we've had to redo the entire video right now, and so I hope you'll bear with us on that. That being said, let's focus on the issue at the moment, which is what just happened in New York State? What just happened in America, and how is this going to affect everyone? To do that, we have to go backwards in time a little bit. We have to go back to 2021. You may recall, this is after the lockdowns, after the BLM riots, and yet there were still protests that were going on across the nation. What were the protests about? The protests were about the vaccine mandate. We were being told by state governments like appointed Governor Kathy Hochul, we were being told by individuals like the Biden-Harris administration that we must accept an experimental drug and that we must take this drug and administer to children. We must administer it to adults. Individuals who are chemo patients, we had to give it to pregnant mothers. A lot of people had a question about that. This was a drug that was being introduced that was in an experimental phase. It was in less than phase 1 of a drug that normally goes through 3-4 phases, that normally takes 7 to 10 years of testing before human trials would ever be allowed. But because of the pandemic, that process was skipped. Whether you agree with that or not is a different question. There were many Americans, millions of Americans, that disagreed. And in many towns and cities across America, just like what you see on the screen, we see Americans said no. Doctors, nurses, healthcare workers came out along with regular citizens and they protested. They say, we do not agree with a mandate, and we do not agree with the government micromanaging our health care, telling us what we can and cannot put in our bodies. And it's kind of fair because we hear that same argument from many on the left now when they talk about abortion, that the government cannot control your right to your body, but yet it was many of these same progressives, many of these same Democrats that were insisting in 2021, even in 2022, insisting that you must follow the directives of the government. You must get an injection of an experimental drug, whether you want it or not, whether you're on chemotherapy or pregnant or not. A lot of people had a problem with that. And as we showed after protest after protest, being the only news media covering all of the protests in the southern tier of New York, we covered as we talked to doctor after doctor, nurse after nurse, healthcare worker after healthcare worker who said that this violated the Hippocratic Oath, that this violated their moral codes, that they were not comfortable following a directive of the government on how they should take care of individual patients. And many doctors wouldn't take the mandate. Many nurses, many healthcare workers would not take the jab. Now, as a result of them saying that they did not agree, either because of medical reasons or because of their moral position, they said no. And what we saw is that Governor Kathy Hochul, and this is coming from the New York Times on November 8th of 2021, almost an entire year ago, Governor Kathy Hochul, she was busy giving money, taxpayer money, to individuals in the tourism industry. She was making payments of $2,750 to 36,000 individuals who lost their jobs because of the pandemic in the tourism industry. Well, that's a nice thing to do. This is after she had already paid $2 billion to illegal aliens, criminals, individuals who do not have a right to be in America. She took $2 billion of taxpayer dollars and spent that money on illegal aliens because they couldn't work, which they're not legally able to do anyway. But she also was going around and saying, well, some industries, she was picking and choosing industries and individuals in those industries to pay them with taxpayer funding. You may or may not agree with that. But at the same time that she was giving money to certain individuals and certain industries, she was also punishing Americans who decided to disagree. Americans who said that the government does not have the right to micromanage healthcare for the citizens, that the government doesn't have the right to inject an experimental drug into children, adults, to anyone. And what Kathy Hochul did at that time, as we reported, September 27th of 2021, that she was going to deploy National Guard troops. She was going to fire any doctor, any nurse, any healthcare worker in New York State that did not obey those. Now, she used different words for it. Oh, it's a medical emergency. This is for the safety of the public. This is a requirement because at the time, if you may recall, we had been through a process where we were told initially that the vaccine would either eliminate COVID or that it would minimize the impact of the pandemic or that it would prevent transmission of the pandemic. All of these things we have now come to find out are not true. It does none of those things. Well, it may reduce the symptoms for some people, but you can still die, you can still transmit it, and you can still catch it. These are the key things we were told by Joe Biden himself that are not true. And so at the time, we were hearing from Kathy Hochul, and she was saying, if you're a doctor, if you're a nurse, a healthcare worker, and you do not obey, you will be fired. She was also threatening police officers and firemen and women. And similar comments were being made by Eric Adams in New York City. As the mayor, he also said, if you worked for the city, if you worked for the government, you had no choice. This was to be followed up by both Eric Adams and Kathy Hochul saying, if you do not obey, you will be fired, even in private businesses. They made this mandate across the board, and then we heard Joe Biden insist on it for the nation as well. And in New York State, as we showed in our coverage of the protests against the vaccine mandate, we had thousands of doctors and nurses. In fact, 34,000 doctors, nurses, healthcare workers refused, were fired, and on top of that, they were denied the ability to even get unemployment. They were shut off from any and all services from New York State. This was about punishing people. This was about making a statement that you must obey the government. They didn't just fire them. They stopped them from getting any government aid that they were giving to illegal aliens at the very same time, aid that they were giving to individuals in the tourism industry and other industries, and yet they were denying it to the first responders who had spent at that point over a year responding to this virus and trying to protect the American people. The Supreme Court of the United States refused multiple times, and as recently as October 5th of 2022, refused to address the health care issue. As we see here, the Supreme Court declined to hear a challenge of the healthcare vaccine mandate brought by 10 separate states, claiming the mandate is an overreach of the federal government's power over the states and states' rights, which would be the 10th Amendment, and violates federal administrative law, like with OSHA. It is an overreach at every aspect, as it is government mandating, demanding action of individuals on their individual lives. And we know that the Supreme Court blocked the Biden administration's attempt to require vaccination or weekly testing of workers at large companies. OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, which was to enforce the policy, withdrew their mandate for large employers. So the government was picking and choosing who had to obey the mandates that they were putting out. Those choices were being made not just on the federal level, but at the state level for certain individuals, and certain other individuals were excluded. As an example, we saw that the CDC and Dr. Fauci were very happy to say that you couldn't go to a church and pray. You couldn't go and see your family members, but you could absolutely go out and protest with BLM and Antifa and progressive leaders of tomorrow. You could go out and protest with them all you wanted. It's a very strange way of choosing things, which seemed very political. Now, because of this confusion, you would expect that the Supreme Court would have taken up this issue. Obviously, there was a disconnect between the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the rest of the people of America. And we needed to see the Supreme Court step up and make a decision to say, this is the line and it cannot be crossed. Instead, the Supreme Court decided that the lower courts would have to resolve this issue in each and every state. And only then, maybe, would they take any further action. Well, that's what brings us to what happened on October 25th, 2 days ago. New York State Supreme Court ordered that New York City has to rehire and pay the back wages to unvaccinated city employees, individuals that were fired under the direction of both appointed Governor Kathy Hochul and Eric Adams, the practical progressive mayor of New York City. And again, I call him the practical progressive because that is what he called himself on CNN day after the election. What we see is that New York City was ordered by New York State Supreme Court. Determination was arbitrary and capricious, that this violated the power of the state government because it made no sense. Quote, the health commissioner cannot create a new condition of employment for city employees. They cannot prohibit an employee from reporting to work, and they cannot terminate employees. The mayor cannot exempt certain employees from these orders. Now, this wasn't about the efficacy or the effectiveness of the vaccine. We've already seen that the vaccine isn't as effective as we were promised it absolutely was. That has changed. This is separate of that. If this was about safety and public health, no one would be exempt. It's time for the city of New York to do what is right and what is just. That's what we are hearing right now. That is the answer that we are hearing from New York State's Supreme Court. That if this were truly about making you safe, if this wasn't political, if this wasn't about the power of the government over the individual, then everyone would have been mandated. There would be no exceptions. And when we say exceptions, we mean for singers and entertainers, for certain protected groups. None of them would be exempted. Now, we even looked at the actual ruling. And in the ruling, where it states, and the link to everything we are showing on the screen will be in the description so that you can follow this for yourself to do your own research. Don't believe us. We're not doctors. We're not attorneys. You can read it for yourself, see if you come to the same conclusion. But they say, in part, whether the record contains sufficient evidence to support the rationality of the determination, the thing is that the mayor, in issuing Executive Order number 62, made a different decision for similarly situated people based on identical facts. There is nothing in the record to support the rationality of keeping a vaccine mandate for public employees while vacating the mandate for private sector employees or creating a carve-out for certain professions like athletes, artists, and performers. This is clearly an arbitrary and capricious action because we are dealing with identical, unvaccinated people being treated differently by the same administrative agency. To put this into layman's terms as best as I can, you can't go out and pick and choose who must be vaccinated and who doesn't have to be vaccinated. You cannot invalidate when an individual says, I don't want the vaccine for whatever reason they choose, and tell them they must be vaccinated, while someone else making the same argument, you say, okay. So if there's a mom and there's a dad, you're telling the mom she must be vaccinated while telling the dad you don't have to be. That's what New York City did, and that's illegal. In fact, that's also what we're seeing that New York State did, because New York State did the same thing. Kathy Hochul, when she told the 34,000 doctors that she fired that they didn't have a job, that they had to get the mandate or they would be fired, she did the same thing. Because just like in New York City, they carved out certain individuals didn't have to have mandates. They just made up the rules as they went. And some people were lucky and some people weren't. We're not talking about whether you choose to have the vaccine. That's your choice. That is a choice for you and your doctor to make based on your health care and your situation. We're not advising you either way. We are pointing out that there were doctors, nurses, healthcare workers who are intimately aware about the medication and its side effects and its efficacy, its ability to work, and they made a decision based on both the Hippocratic Oath and their experience and said no. They wouldn't do it for themselves, and many of them would not give it to someone else. And the government decided to punish them. The government fired them, whether that's in New York City as city employees, or if it was in New York State, doctors and nurses across the state. And because this was capricious, because this was arbitrary, because this was ridiculous, we saw that the courts have turned around and said, you can't do that. Not only can you not do that, you must pay for this. The city must rehire those employees. The city must make payment, back payment for each and every one of those individuals because the city knows it was wrong. In fact, the city knew it was wrong back in June of 2022 when they went to those employees and said, hey, if you get the vaccine, we will rehire you. Again, reinforcing the need for obedience to the government, but also recognizing they were wrong to fire these individuals in the first place, both because of the needs of the state, but also because it was wrong for the government. It was an overreach of their power. We went out and we had to speak to a couple of the lawyers that we know. And we've reached out and lawyers across this country that we've spoken to over the years. And one of them in particular was our good friend, Mr. Doug Drazen. And we asked Mr. Drazen, are we wrong? Are we misunderstanding the law? Are we misunderstanding the application of the law? And Mr. Drazen happened to say, yes, this was a good decision by the court. Mr. Drazen said that it makes sense because this was capricious. So we had to ask Mr. Drazen, based on his knowledge as an attorney who's held many cases and run for elected office. We asked Mr. Drazen, so looking with this case in New York City, will it affect New York State? The 34,000 doctors and healthcare workers, the nurses, and so many other individuals, the police officers and firemen that were fired by Kathy Hochul, would this apply to them as well? Does this set a precedent? In other words, a rule that has to be followed everywhere. Mr. Drazen said that depending on the circumstances, it's very possible, it is very likely that you could see this become precedent, that New York State would be overruled and New York State would be forced to rehire the doctors, nurses, healthcare workers and pay them the back pay that is due because they were wrongfully fired. It was an overreach of the power of the government of New York State. To quote Mr. Drazen, he said, "It was wrong to fire tens of thousands of Americans. It was a huge overreaction by the government at every level." We agree with Mr. Drazen on this, and we believe that it does set a precedent. We believe that you will see New York State be called out. That appointed Governor Kathy Hochul abused the power given to her by the New York State Assembly, by the New York State Senate, controlled by Democrats, that they gave her too much power under the emergency powers, and that they have not tried to rein in her abusive actions, that she used her power to punish people on a political basis and forcing them to obey the government or else. And we believe that, and Mr. Drazen agrees, that they should be receiving their back pay. But it is possible they might be able to sue for the extenuating circumstances, having to move out of New York State, as many of these individuals did, that they had to, they lost their homes or other circumstances. It is possible. And if we are correct, and if Mr. Drazen is correct, and we believe that it is possible that you could see this at a state level, given that this will be debated in the courts for some time. But if ultimately this is the New York City decision is meant to be precedent, and New York State loses, as we believe they ultimately will, well then every state is facing the same thing. California, Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, states that went out and punished American citizens for daring to say that they have an individual right to decide their own health care, that the government cannot micromanage their lives. We know that the protesters were correct. The vaccine was not going to prevent you getting the pandemic, transmitting the pandemic. It wouldn't prevent you from dying from the pandemic. It may or may not reduce the severity of the pandemic. And it may, and we are still learning, may have side effects that can be severe for some individuals. They had everything right in their question. Now comes the consequences. Something that Democrats are desperate not to discuss with the American public. Something they are desperate to try and avoid. They do not want you to think about this, especially not before November 8th, which is why I believe why the New York City decision is not being spoken about more. Why we are not hearing this across the nation, even though the implication is that this could be a national precedent, that this could change what we have seen, not just in states like California, states like Michigan. No, this could also affect all the American citizens that were removed. They were fired from the military by the Biden-Harris administration for not accepting the experimental drug, and the government saying you have no choice. So this has far-reaching implications. And we have to wonder, so what about those people? They were fired. Someone had to be hired to replace at least some of those individuals. What happens to those people? See, the implications get really wicked here. So now you have two people who are hired or in place to do the same job. You have duplication. Who gets fired? What's the reasoning for the person who gets fired? How are they going to determine which person keeps the job? The person who had it originally or the new person who has that position? And how are we going to compensate the people that cannot continue in the job? Or is the government just going to expand and grow its size, absorbing all these individuals doing duplicate jobs, wasting taxpayer dollars, and being even less effective than government is already, which is really amazing considering most people think that the government, whether it's New York City or New York State or many other states, they're ineffective as is. Why will the government not speak about this? Why is it that the news media will not touch this? They barely mentioned this. I spoke to several lawyers who didn't even know that this had happened because there is an election. In 2 weeks, we will see Americans across this nation go out and vote, and Democrats are losing. That's something that we even heard from Chuck Schumer today on a hot mic, admitting that Democrats are in trouble in many, many races. He's already said previously in October that he expects that Democrats will lose the House and by 60%, that we are seeing a red wave, most likely, that if Republicans show up, if Americans show up, they're voting red. Democrats are going to lose power, significantly lose power. That's something that everyone accepts. Whether they will say that publicly, that's maybe a different question. And to preserve their position, we are hearing Joe Biden now say that the inflation that you are suffering from right now, inflation that has doubled the price of eggs, doubled the price of crackers, that has led to a shortage of butter, led to a shortage of baby food formula, that has shelves that are 15% empty. That recession, that economy, he changed the definition of recession. And now he is saying that inflation will be gentle. It won't be that bad going forward, even though it already is that bad, as people are spending 40% more for food, for energy, for electricity or gas, for heating their homes. We already see that this is a problem because Democrats need to win the election. They need to preserve as much of the power as they can. Their focus isn't on you, it's on their power. It's the exact same reason that got us into this situation where the reason why New York City and possibly New York State have to be concerned about how they're going to pay for all these employees, where this money is going to come from, and what they're going to do with all the duplicate positions that are now going to exist. They did this to themselves because they were more concerned about power and telling people what they will or will not do with their own bodies and micromanaging the lives of the public. They put themselves into this problem. This is a situation that never should have happened in the first place. I want to take this moment as an opportunity to remember all of those people in the protests in 2021. All those individuals, those moms, those dads, those doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, all those individuals who went out and were ostracized by the news media. They were ostracized by social media. They were demonized and have been continuously demonized by the Biden-Harris administration. They were right on so many levels, on so many points. They were correct. And now we are seeing in the courts, they are being proven correct yet again. Thank you. I want to thank the people who protested because they pointed out the government doesn't have the right, especially when it comes to an experimental drug that nobody has confidence in. I'm not trying to give a medical diagnosis. I'm not recommending or not recommending what you do with your body, your health care, the conversation you have with your doctor. That's for you to decide. But I am saying there was value in what happened in the vaccine mandate protests in 2021. There was a reason why the news media tried to not tell you about it. They tried to minimize this. They tried to ignore this. And there is a reason why the news media is not talking about this decision in New York City and how it will affect not only New York State, but the entire nation potentially. Think about that before you vote. Maybe you would want to reach out to individuals like Assemblywoman Donna Lopardo, like County Executive Jason Garnar, individuals like Josh Riley of the New York 19th District, Antonio Delgado, who abandoned the New York 19th District, appointed Governor Kathy Hochul, as well as governors like Greg Newsom, Whitmer out of Michigan, Wolf out of Pennsylvania, to go over to all of these governors and these elected officials and ask them, why won't you speak about this? Why won't you admit you were wrong? Why did you force people to obey? And why will you not apologize because you were wrong? Base your vote on their response to that question. Now, we do expect to hear from other attorneys from around the country as we continue to follow this case. And as we get more input, we will make sure to share that with you. We want to thank Doug Drazen for his legal opinion and speaking with us on this matter and what may be potentially coming down the road. And we look forward, every one of those individuals who protested in 2021, those individuals concerned about the health care of American citizens, we look forward to seeing them validated as we go forward. I thank you, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. I know you've heard it before. What difference does it? You make the difference. When you watch, chat, tweets, your likes and shares, and your subscription, you make the difference. From across the world, you help us to keep the lights on and the stream alive. You are making the difference to fight the woke and the crazy legislation that we see before. We at No Soundbites Allowed, and I want to thank you for everything that you do in helping us reach our goal, and your likes, your tweets, your comments, and your subscriptions to the channel. We want to thank you from the bottom of our heart. And this is a special thank you to those who have donated to the channel and helped us in all of our efforts. We will strive to make this channel the best that we possibly can, because you deserve no less. Thank you.